I am reading to you from A Pair of Tickets by Amy Tan. They are my mother's twin daughters from her first marriage. Little babies she was forced to abandon on a road as she was fleeing Wei Lin for Chongqing in 1944. That was all my mother had told me about these daughters, so they had remained babies in my mind all these years, sitting on the side of a road, listening to bombs whistling in the distance while sucking their patient red thumbs. And it was only this year that someone found them and wrote with this joyful news. A letter came from Shanghai addressed to my mother. When I first heard about this, that they were alive, I imagined my identical sisters transforming from little babies into 6-year-old girls. In my mind, they were seated next to each other at a table, taking turns with the fountain pen. One would write a neat row of characters, "Dearest Mama, we are alive." She would brush back her wispy bangs and hand the other sister the pen, and she would write, "Come get us, please hurry." Of course, they could not know that my mother had died 3 months before suddenly, when a blood vessel in her brain burst. One minute she was talking to my father, complaining about the tenants upstairs, scheming how to evict them under the pretense that relatives from China were moving in. The next minute she was holding her head, her eyes squeezed shut, groping for the sofa, and then crumbling softly to the floor with fluttering hands. So my father had been the first one to open the letter, a long letter it turned out. And they did call her Mama. They said they had always revered her as their true mother. They kept a framed picture of her. They told her about their life, from the time my mother last saw them on the road leaving Wei Lin to when they were finally found. And the letter had broken my father's heart so much, these daughters calling my mother from another life he never knew, that he gave the letter to my mother's old friend, Auntie Lindo, and asked her to write back and tell my sisters in the gentlest way possible that my mother was dead. But instead, Auntie Lindo took the letter to the Joy Luck Club and discussed with Auntie Ying and Auntie Ann May what should be done, because they had known for many years about my mother's search for her twin daughters, her endless hope. Auntie Lindo and the others cried over this double tragedy of losing my mother 3 months before and now again. And so they couldn't help but think of some miracle, some possible way of reviving her from the dead so my mother could fulfill her dream. So this is what they wrote to my sisters in Shanghai. Dearest daughters, I too have never forgotten you in my memory or in my heart. I never gave up hope that we will see each other again in a joyous reunion. I am only sorry it has been too long. I want to tell you everything about my life since I last saw you. I want to tell you this when our family comes to see you in China. They signed it with my mother's name. It wasn't until all this had been done that they first told me about my sisters, the letter they received, and the one they wrote back. They'll think she's coming then, I murmured, and I had imagined my sisters now being 10 or 11, jumping up and down, holding hands, their pigtails bouncing, excited that their mother was coming, whereas my mother was dead. How can you say she is not coming in the letter, said Auntie Lindo. She is their mother. She is your mother. You must be the one to tell them. All these years they have been dreaming of her. And I thought she was right. But then I started dreaming too of my mother and my sisters and how it would be if I arrived in Shanghai. All these years while they waited to be found, I had lived with my mother and then lost her. I imagined seeing my sisters in the airport. They would be standing on their tiptoes looking anxiously, scanning from one dark head to another as we got off the plane. And I would recognize them instantly, their faces with the identical worried look. Sister, sister, we are here, I saw myself saying in my poor version of Chinese. Where's Mama, they would say, and look around, still smiling, two flushed and eager faces. Is she hiding? And this would have been like my mother, to stand behind just a bit, to tease a little, and make people's patience pull a little on their hearts. I would shake my head and tell my sisters she was not hiding. Oh, that must be Mama. No? One of my sisters would whisper excitedly, pointing to another small woman completely engulfed in a tower of presents. And that too would have been like my mother, to bring mountains of gifts, food, and toys for children, all bought on sale, but shunning thanks, saying the gifts were nothing, and later turning the labels over to show my sisters Calvin Klein 100% wool. I imagine myself starting to say, "Sisters, I am sorry, I have come alone." And before I could tell them, they could see it in my face. They were wailing, pulling their hair, their lips twisted in pain as they ran away from me. And then I saw myself getting back on the plane and coming home. After I had this dream, this scene many times, watching their despair turn from horror into anger, I begged Auntie Lindo to write another letter, and at first she refused. "How can I say she is dead? I cannot write this," said Auntie Lindo with a stubborn look. "But it's cruel to have them believe she's coming on their plane," I said. "When they see it's just me, they'll hate me." "Hate you? Cannot be," she was scowling. "You are their own sister, their own family." "You don't understand," I protested. "What don't I understand?" she said. And I whispered, "They'll think I'm responsible, that she died because I didn't appreciate her." And Auntie Lindo looked satisfied and sad at the same time, as if this were true and I had finally realized it. She sat down for an hour, and when she stood up, she handed me a 2-page letter. She had tears in her eyes. I realized that the very thing I had feared, she had done. So even if she had written the news of my mother's death in English, I wouldn't have had the heart to read it. "Thank you," I whispered.